Please remain please remain muted while other speakers are talking. Feel free to ask questions during the Q&A or type any questions you have in the chat. Today, we're going to go over the course a little bit and talk about youth leadership and awareness building of self and others. We want to thank all of our amazing partners who have made this summer program possible. This is co-hosted by the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University's Earth Institute and SDGs Today, which is part of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network at the UN. We're also supported by Mission 4.7, the World Happiness Report, the Global Happiness Council, and the Columbia Climate School. The Eco Ambassadors program is designed to combine science training, giving you hard technical skills, with eco advocacy to really build the climate leaders of the future. A few quick program reminders. Please complete the week 1 feedback form on Google Classroom. This will be really important for shaping the program for the duration of the summer and also in the future. And this will allow us to distribute the ESRI license, which will help you start working on your final story map projects. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the session as well. So we're going to start with a little icebreaker and warm up. Feel free to turn your cameras off for this if you'd like. But I think it's really fun and important to warm up your body as well as your brain. So we're going to start with a little bit of stretching. Reach up as high as you can, and then down, and then back up, and down, and back up, and down. Yeah, I really appreciate getting some movement in on the Zoom calls. I hope you enjoyed that. We'll be doing more of these icebreakers and fun warm-ups from the Happiness Project throughout the sessions. So today we're really going to be looking at climate storytelling and how it's important to you, how you can use it, as well as the different skills you want to develop as leaders and global citizens throughout this summer. So first, we have an amazing guest speaker, Nick Kleese, from the Department of Writing at University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, and he's also the Director of Outreach for the Center of Climate Literacy at University of Minnesota. And today, Nick will be sharing more about what is climate literacy and how we can use climate storytelling.
Thank you, Skylar. And thank you all for being here and for being rad eco global citizens and ambassadors. I want to talk a little bit about what it is I do and a little bit about how what I do can give us insight into storytelling or telling your climate story. And I want to leave ample time for questions and discussion afterward too. So I'll move fairly quickly, but not so quickly that I start rambling, I hope. And I believe I can control the screen. I can, yes. So my name is Nick Kleese. I use he, him pronouns. And like Skylar said, I am currently a lecturer in first year writing at the University of Minnesota, but I am also the Director of Outreach at the Center for Climate Literacy here. Prior to coming to Minnesota, I was high school English teacher, also a nature immersion educator with kindergartners, and I was a farm kid. So I'm the first in my family to go to college and graduate from college. Prior to me, my family farmed pigs and corn pretty much. And I come from Washington County, which is highlighted in red here on the screen, and we are known for being the 3rd leading pork producing county in the nation. So there's about 20,000 human beings in the county, over 1.5 million pigs, the majority of which are raised in CAFOs or confined animal feeding operations. So watching this boom of the pork industry over the past 20 years really got me into climate activism and climate literacy work because it's horrifying to me, and it's sad to see what destruction that has on the ecology of my home county and the humans and the non-human animals. So that's where I'm coming from. And I bring all of that to my work at the Center for Climate Literacy. We're a pretty new center at the University of Minnesota. Formally, we've been around for a year and a half or so, but we've been doing this work informally a little longer than that. And we do a variety of things, but the through line of what we do is we try to provide K-12 teachers, in-service teachers, the resources they need to teach climate literacy in their classrooms, regardless of grade level and regardless of content area. So we believe climate literacy education should be happening in pre-K, should be happening in 3rd grade, 7th grade, high school, higher ed, informal education. It should be happening in math. It should be happening in science, in English language, in music and art, so that this conversation never really stops and it becomes really, the climate crisis becomes impossible to ignore any longer. And so specifically, some of the things that we do are we publish a scholarly journal that publishes not only the sort of standard scholarly articles and analyses, but also publishes teachers. So we publish lesson plans, teacher reflections, and we also publish student work too. So the covers for each of our journals are designed by students, which is really rad. We also have an editorial and advising board, which you see on the right-hand side and on the bottom middle. These are activists, educators in the community, artists, writers who give us insight on what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. We also have we also have a few different professional development opportunities for educators, one of which is a year-long teacher fellowship program. And we work with these folks over the course of a whole school year to develop lesson plans and other materials for their classroom. So the 5 folks you see in the upper middle are our current fellows, and they come from English language arts, math, Chinese immersion, and science. So they've been doing really rad work, and it's been a privilege to work with them. And for all the things that we do and all the work we're trying to do with educators, we're also trying to advance a definition of climate literacy that centers storytelling. So the sort of mainstream and historical definition of climate literacy is really climate science literacy. It's an understanding of the science behind climate and the climate crisis. So what happens when sea level temperatures rise? What happens when CO2 emissions rise? What are the effects of that? Those sorts of things go into being climate science literate. And that is important. And that is a part of the way that we understand climate literacy. But for us, we are trying to understand climate literacy in a more expansive way. So for us, a climate literate person is someone who knows the climate science, but is able to translate that science into values, attitudes, beliefs, and actions that can alleviate the climate crisis. And we believe the best way to do that is through telling stories. And right now, y'all know this, so I'm not saying anything that's new to you. The dominant stories that are being told about climate are either climate denial or climate despair. So by denial, that could be just like flat out denial that climate change is occurring, or it could be a soft form of denial where folks might like recognize that climate change is happening, but believe that we can take our time or that someone else will take care of it. So that's a denial of the urgency of the crisis. Another corresponding story to that is climate despair. And this story tells us that, yes, climate change is happening, but there's nothing we can do. We just kind of got to live things out until the climate collapses. And we see this a lot, especially in young adult fiction. So you think of all the dystopian novels and films and shows that you've seen or read. It's everywhere. And at the Center for Climate Literacy, we reject that story. We don't believe that's true, and we want to offer a more hopeful, more active, and more transformative story that gives us hope and gives us a pathway for moving forward. And this is the reason why stories are important, is that they give us this opportunity to imagine and reflect on what else our global civilization could look like. And so for us, that hope is not a passive disposition or capacity, but it's an active thing. It's hope is a way of seeing alternatives and acting on them. And for that reason, one of my favorite climate texts is this book in translation by Shinsuke Yoshitake called There Must Be More Than That. And the story does exactly what the title says. The protagonist's brother comes in and says, oh, like the world's bad, it's getting worse, there's nothing we can do. And the protagonist says, as you can see on the slide, no, that's wrong, there's always alternatives. And it's fun to think about what's beyond good or bad or yes or no. There's always multiple things that we could do. And for this reason, I think and believe and know that stories that come from young people themselves are the most important stories that we can tell about the climate. And this is going to be way too brief, but I want to put out a few ideas there as y'all think about your story maps and your projects, is that as you think about what your project is and what your story map will be, I encourage you, if you are comfortable with it, to consider including your story to your very specific story. That doesn't need to be explicitly in regards to the climate crisis, but I think knowing that there's an individual human being who's creating the story and sharing the story makes it all the more powerful. And as you do that, think about what real possible ideas for alternative social structures you can offer. So, my pitch for education is that, or my alternative vision of education is that climate literacy is taught in every classroom. It's not just for science educators, but it's for everybody. That's the alternative that I put forward. So you can think about what your passion is and what you want folks to hone in on. As with any good story, you can think about plot. And this doesn't need to be super clear in your telling of it, but if you have in mind, at least a starting point, and that could be like, here is where we are in 2023, and here's where we want to be in 2030. That's enough of a plot to draw folks' attention in. And the fourth suggestion, the rule of three. I could teach a whole course on this, but for now, as you're thinking about what you want to include in your story, think about what can come in threes. So that could be 3 steps, maybe 3 images that repeat, 3 motifs that come back around, maybe a line or a phrase is repeated 3 times. There's a lot of power in just the number 3. And so even if you find just one thing to repeat 3 times, that in itself can be powerful. And if you think about some of the powerful stories that you heard as a young person, especially oral stories, if you're familiar with the 3 Little Pigs, rule of 3, it's just this thing that we know and we understand as human beings. And if you are thinking about perhaps going into education, and I'd be happy to talk more about this too in the Q&A, and I'll be done after this slide. So I'm going to welcome your questions and ideas. But in my mind, if you are considering education, it would be good if you enjoyed working with people. That doesn't mean that you need to be an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I love working with people, but it's very tiring for me. So at the end of the day, I need to take a nap before I can do anything else. But I really do enjoy working with folks and finding ways to have their ideas come to fruition. I think it's also important to balance idealism and optimism with the realities of the present. I work with pre-service teachers. And so these are folks who are getting their teaching license and they're getting ready to teach. And sometimes folks have this very romantic idea of what education is or what teaching is going to be like. And I think that can be good to hang on to, but the reality is much more complex than that. So if you can kind of balance those two, that'll get you pretty far. And no matter what you're interested in teaching, no matter where or who you're interested in teaching, I encourage you to think about how you can bring climate literacy or what y'all are learning this summer as part of this program into your classrooms. And so if this is something you are interested in doing, you can start thinking of opportunities to teach informally right now. So that doesn't necessarily need to be in a classroom. It could be teaching in a summer program. It could be tutoring. It could be coaching. Anything where you have sort of a mentorship role or a facilitation role can help give you practice at some of those foundational skills that teachers need. And as you do these things, and you collect these informal teaching experiences, hang on to those as potential models for what you might do in a K-12 classroom, if that's where you want to go. Some of the most important lessons I learned about teaching did not come in my teaching training, and it did not come while I was teaching in a classroom. It came from my experiences teaching informally in nature education, coaching sports. I learned a lot from those folks and those contexts. And I think they made me a better teacher in the classroom. So, I see a couple comments in the chat. Yes, teaching, you've no doubt heard and experienced some of the stresses happening now in regards to education. It's sort of a fraught field, but at the heart, I love teaching. It brings me a lot of joy. And whether you want to teach or whatever you want to do, even working on your story maps, find the joy in that, I hope. And on that point, I'm looking forward to an enjoyable discussion. So I'll be done now. Take a drink of water. And yeah, let me know what questions or thoughts y'all have. Oh, I see one comment about just informal teaching about climate generally. Yes. And I'll underscore that point that education happens in the classroom, but if you think about how much time you spend outside of the classroom in your lives and how much you learn outside of the classroom, that might even be a more generative space than classroom teaching. So as ambassadors, like y'all will be teaching about climate, even in like one-on-one interactions you have with folks in the future, but because you are knowledgeable now and experienced now, you'll have insight to offer others. So yeah, you are teachers already. Let's see. Do you have any tips on telling others climate stories with integrity and respectfulness? Oh, that's such a good question. Yes, I think one important thing to do with that is to consider if someone has already told that story, if the community is already working on storytelling, and if there are already stories that exist from that community, then that can be a place to start and pause and listen and learn from those stories. And always reaching out to folks too, and seeing how you can plug in. I also think it's important to recognize positionalities too. So I am a white man from the Midwest, and I tell my own story from that perspective too. when I talk about the experiences of other communities, I am mindful of that positionality and try to find certainly differences in experience that have to do with identity, but also geography, but also similarities too. And I think, keeping in mind to connections and collaborations and community building, even across difference, can go a long way. So that's not a short answer to your question, Senna, but it's sort of a way of approaching the idea of sharing others' stories. Yeah, cross-cultural storytelling. And Robert asks a similar question, cross-cultural storytelling, giving linguistic and pedagogical differences. Yeah, another really good question. And I think, maybe I'll extend what I was saying about Senna's question. And in that work, some of it's going to depend on the very specific project that you're doing. But as a first step and a rule of thumb, I find it very useful and important to, one, try to find a way to connect with that community first, before you begin working on that. So that could be, a community elder, a scholar in that community, a community leader, just somebody in that community that you could reach out to and begin talking with, to see what you might have to share, what you might need to learn, those sorts of things. Lots of really good questions. I want to ask y'all for your thoughts on these. Lara asks, what would be the best way to educate vulnerable communities about the climate crisis? Good question. And I think about that in relationship to my home community too, which is majority white, but working class, generally undereducated in the formal sense. So not a lot of folks go to college. And at the same time, folks in my home community are living the climate crisis. Like they're living in an area that has water pollution, air pollution, soil degradation. And so they have these embodied experiences that can teach me a lot, because now I'm not living in that community anymore. And at the same time, I have something to share too, because I have the privilege of having time and space to do reading, have wonderful conversations like this. And so we can talk across those different ways of understanding the crisis. For me right now, it's more intellectual. For folks in my home community, it's more experiential and lived. And so, Lara, to your question, the best way to educate vulnerable communities about the crisis would be maybe to think about what you can share, like what they can teach you, what you can teach them. I think there are just a couple other questions, and I want to make sure that I leave time for the other presentation too. So Skylar and folks, holler at me if or when I need to stop. But Tim asks earlier, when you try to implement climate literacy into a curriculum, do you see resistance from institutions or policymakers? If so, what kind? I'm fortunate being in Minnesota, where folks are pretty receptive to teaching about climate. The resistance that we have, that I see most common, isn't necessarily like a militant resistance where like you can't do that, but it's more so like, we don't have the place in the curriculum, there's not enough time, there's not enough funding to provide training for folks, even if people are receptive to it. So that's that sort of like soft denial that I see. In my home state of Iowa, folks might be more militantly resistant to the idea of teaching about climate as something that's like politically sensitive. And when those situations arise, sometimes it's just a matter of changing the vocabulary. So rather than calling it climate or nature, we can call it the outdoors, because people don't see themselves necessarily as an environmentalist, but they might see themselves as an outdoor person. These have different connotations, but essentially they mean the same thing. right? So finding ways to work through some of the negative connotations folks might have with climate literacy, and finding shared values and shared commitments is step number one. And then the last question I see is, what kind of elements do we need in stories, and to make sure that they're heard? I said this earlier, but I'll say it again too, that I think having specific characters, and for me, I like speaking first from the first person because it helps ground myself. But if you can think of a very specific voice, whether it's you or a non-human animal or a plant or another human, to kind of help your readers and listeners come into the story. Humans have an easier time understanding stories if they have a character to identify with. And that's part of the challenge of talking about climate, the climate crisis, is because it's so big and abstract that it can begin to become hard to focus on particulars. But if you can find a particular voice, to bring folks in to identify with, that's another way to get folks on board. That's part of the reason why Greta Thunberg became sort of the face and the voice of the youth climate protest, is because the protests needed someone as representative, and that happened to be Greta. So yes. Wow, I said this earlier, but I'd really love, I know this isn't possible, but I wish we could have this conversation go on for a long time. And I'm really curious to see what y'all come up with for your projects. And I am always happy to answer questions too. My email is right there, so you can reach out to me at any time. We, again, at the Center for Climate Literacy, do publish student work. We publish youth work, and we want more of that. Adults have had the primary say in the climate crisis for a long time. And I think I'm motivated to stop paying lip service to that and to actually include youth voice. So if you want to plug in, just give me a holler. But Skylar and folks, is there anything else y'all would like from me before we transition?
No, I think that was an excellent discussion and so informative. And thank you to everyone who asked questions. They were so engaging. And just a reminder to all of our eco ambassadors and students, there's an activity this week for you to practice your own climate storytelling, if that's something you'd like to submit to Nick in the journal. And I think it's really great practice for you thinking towards the future of your story map to get work with the storytelling and specifically telling your own climate stories. Thank you again to Nick for an amazing presentation and for teaching us so much about climate literacy. And now we are going to talk to Dina Buchbinder and Gabby Lozano Campos about their work at Education for Sharing. Dina is the founder and president, and Gabby is the chief operating officer. And we're going to start with an activity led by them and then learn more about global citizenship and education.
Thank you so much. It's a true privilege to be here with you. Gabby and I are tremendously excited about getting to know you, ambassadors, and to share a little bit of the work that we do at Education for Sharing. And just super briefly, and after that incredible presentation that Nick shared with us, and after seeing all your questions, to share a little bit of the context in Education for Sharing, our mission is to raise better global citizens through a very special methodology that we want you to get a taste on. So if at all possible, we would like to invite you to open your cameras, whoever feels safe and ready to. We will have an activity, and it's an activity called Shadow Shadow. And so if you want to give me even a thumbs up, that would be awesome, just to know that we can start. And Shadow Shadow is like this. We will I will make a something, and I will pass it to someone else. So you can be my shadow, and then I will invite someone else to be a shadow. I am looking through our ambassadors, and I would like to pass the shadow to Robert Liu. So you make a movement, and we will all follow you, and then you'll pass it to someone else.
I'll pass it to Anvi.
I'll pass it to Advay and Shusra.
Advay, can you pass it on to someone else?
I said I'll pass it on to Shreya.
Yeah, Shreya was doing her move. You're doing really well.
I'm passing it on to Sarah.
All right, I'm passing it to, wait, who hasn't got it yet? To Rosa.
Yeah. And Rosa, you'll be the last shadow, the last guide for this moment. Go, Rosa. Rosa, do you want to be the guide? Maybe meanwhile, Rosa can open her camera. Would you like to pass it on to someone else?
Anvi. Maybe Anvi can go.
Yeah.
Yeah, to Radhika.
Wonderful.
Oh, okay. Shadow to Anvi. Okay, I'll pass it to Rosa now.
Rosa Maria Atique, do Brasil. Okay. Yay.
Maybe I can close. Can I be the guy?
Rosa is, I think she managed to open her camera.
Wonderful.
Oh. Oh, I don't know where Rosa went. Gabby, why don't you take us home while
Yeah.
Rosa connects again?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Stretch. Shadow to Dina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for playing with us. This is a very simple game, but it's I want to share some questions that we're very keen to learn about you from you during this game. Who liked being the guide the most and why? Could you please share if you were a guide passing on the shadow, who did you like being the guide or the shadow the best and why? Yes, Ambi, please.
Well, I liked like seeing other people's reactions to my move.
Uh-huh. Exactly. And did anyone else like more preferring being the shadow? Lara?
Well, I just I was like I like being the guide, but I did not know what to do with the movements. I just did like parts of a TikTok dance. But I also like being the shadow because I knew what to do, although it was like a bit awkward. It was very cool. I liked it.
Wonderful. How did you decide to what moves to make? Was
Wait,
it
me?
difficult to decide? Yes.
Oh, yeah, it was kind of difficult because I didn't really know what to do. But then I thought about this song Cupid that's been trending on social media, and I just did random
Ah,
steps from that dance. So it was fun.
it was really fun. And and what do you think this has to do with guiding a team? Do you think this has any connection to leaders that have to take into consideration different things when guiding a team?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to be creative to think about the movements you're gonna make. You also have to be brave because you never know if what you're doing is too ridiculous or too like perhaps outrageous, and you have to be like brave to take that step, like, oh, to stop caring about what the others think, but to take that initiative. And also, well, you have to make sure they have fun, right? To carry your team with you, not just tell them where to go, but to do it together, I think.
That is huge. Thank you, Lara. Yes, I'm very deeply connected to all that you are learning now about being ambassadors for climate, from your communities and inspiring. That was a beautiful answer. And what responsibilities do you think we had as guides, even in this game? Guides doing the movements that others would do as our shadows.
Well,
And
I think, uh, do you want someone else to answer? Or?
you can answer, and everybody else is also invited. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think that the responsibility is to put the foot out first, you know, to to be able to, us as leaders, give the example, and the rest should follow, not because we tell them to, but because they see that we're having fun and that we're doing actually great things and they want to do it as well.
That's excellent. And so on the counterpart, what responsibilities do you think the team has? Anyone else, like being a guide and being the team? Is that the same? Is it different? What responsibilities do you think as a team do we have? Yes, Ambi, please.
Like as a team, we can like support our guide or leader and like encourage them and help them out like when they need it, because yeah, they're like leading us forward. Yeah.
Yes. And so supporting each other, right? And what do you think? Is it possible that we can all be leaders and form a part of a team in favor of sustainability? Can we play both roles? And how is that possible? Yes, Lara, please.
Well, I think that in the sustainability area, there's a lot to do. You know, there's the economical sector, there's the political sector, there's the science sector. So I think that perhaps we can all be leaders in a very specific area, but be working as a team to move towards a common goal, because perhaps I will be in the economic sector and the political guide will be like, you know, the one that makes the movement, but I will still be contributing in a certain way and I will be the leader of my area of expertise. So I think that's something very cool about this particular subject.
There is so much to be done, right? And there's so many trenches that we come from that complement each other. And there is a real interdependence throughout all these areas that you mentioned, Lara. So absolutely. And I wonder, from this very simple activity, if you got any insights or ideas about what can you do starting from today to be a better guide in this area of sustainability? Are there any? I want to see the hands. Any ideas? Or something that you want to share that came to your mind after this game, the shadow. Yes, please, Lara.
Well, perhaps, you know how people, well, for me, it was like in my family. I can be an example, for example, for my little brother or my parents, also within a group of friends. I can invite them to do some activities or projects with me, and also like the rest of society in my school area. I can behave in a certain way that is different. People may see me and say, well, I also want to act like that because I want to make a change. And that way we can make a huge network by starting ourselves.
That is huge. And every single one of the ideas that you mentioned and the concrete action points that you mentioned are critical. So thank you for sharing that, Lara. And I see Sena's hands also up. Please share with us, Sena.
Sorry, my camera isn't like working that well, but I
All
think one
good.
theme was like unity and making sure that everyone was like on the same page, because I think so often I see issues with like everyone not striving towards the same goal or like being disunified in that way. And I think especially in the context of climate change, like making sure that we have like a good foundational understanding of what we want to strive towards and how we want to get there, I think is important as well.
That is absolutely critical. You are referring to the heart of the issue is teamwork. Sena, is really teamwork. And if, for example, in this game, Shadow, everybody did whatever they wanted and didn't contribute, then it wouldn't have been fun, and then we wouldn't have learned together all these incredible insights that you are now sharing. So really it's about seeing and going towards the same north and rowing together, right? to achieve this incredibly challenging task that we have in our present and in our future. And Anvi, I see your hand is up too.
Yeah, like adding on, basically, like within a team, there should be some type of mutual like balance and connection. Like going back to the question you asked before, in a team, there should be multiple leaders. At the same time, depending on like the scenario or like circumstance, we need some people, we need like a leader, but also a listener and observer, like to balance it out, because like those different personalities can often clash, and like that will lead to like, yeah, separation between the team, and there should be some type of like connection and, yeah, like balance.
It's pure wisdom here. Thank you, Anvi. That's exactly right. And we need all the voices, all the different characteristics and personalities and ways of integrating, because you know, we're only going to move the needle as we collaborate and as we celebrate the diversity within the teams and bring on board other voices that can think differently and that can work together. So thank you so much for playing with us, for reflecting, and for sharing your insights on how to take action on just this very simple game, Shadow, which we invite you to play with, as you said, some of you said, with your siblings or neighbors or families. Please do. And so with that, we want to share also a little bit more about, so you went to the heart of education for sharing, which is that we play. We have an extraordinary team of really committed leaders, very diverse leaders from different, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Dina.
Oh, thank you. Yes, from all walks of life, from different geographies, different colors, flavors, smells, all of it. And that's what makes us really go forward to raise better global citizens. So you just shared in a nutshell what a global citizen is. With your answers, with your participation, it's clear that you are aware of yourself, aware of others, and also aware of the global and local challenges. You also recognize your interdependence with the world. So meaning that whatever you do here really has a consequence elsewhere and vice versa. And that you are actively assuming responsibility to participate in building this equitable, more just, happier also world, and of course inclusive and towards a sustainable global society. So if you see, when we speak about these very big concepts like sustainability and the greening, education, etc., it really has to do with values, right? You mentioned a lot of values during the game that we play, and that is also at the core of any mission that we have, anything that we set our minds to. So in education for sharing, we play, reflect, and take action. And the games that we play all have to do with the Sustainable Development Goals, and also to learn about how do we practice civic values and what do civic values have to do with achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and also the kind of social emotional skills that can really harness the understanding and the success in achieving the contributing towards the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as an active participation. So what we did after the game was the circle of reflection, and then within the reflection, we have the take action part. So here we have some examples that we wanted to share with you from different, very different contexts. One is Karim. He's a 10-year-old boy from Mexico, from a state called Estado de Mexico, in a public school surrounded by crime and violence. And he was also, Gabby will remember, the shyest kid that we've ever met, but he became super garbage. He decided to start a campaign. And Gabby, can you tell us more about the Global Citizens, please? You're finding your mic. Okay. Yes. Well, while you find your mic, it just to.
Okay, I found it. It's just
Oh.
that I was controlling the screen and I couldn't see the. Yeah, so the history is super garbage. Is he was like really shy, but we are sure that everyone can be a global citizen and an agent of change. So with their school. The school is in a very polluted area in Mexico City. In Estado de Mexico is the state that is surrounded Mexico City. And they were like really worried about the pollution and everything in their community. So when they come up with an initiative that it was a campaign to separate garbage. But they were like really, okay, they create different trash cans to understand, but they were like really worried about how can we teach the younger kids to separate garbage. So they come up with this superhero that it was super trash, and they create their own games. So they have been playing games with us about sustainability, about different SDGs, and they come up with their own games and they create this superhero so they could share with the youngest ones how to separate the garbage in the school. And it was 11 years ago, and the teachers tell us that they still have this initiative in their school. So Karim is maybe in high school now, but his initiative and the initiative of the children is still there. And also the other one that we wanted to share with you is this one. Let me try to move because it has a delay. Okay, the second one is the rap and mural against violence. In this case, this one was in Mexico City, and it's in a very violent area and very unsafe area in Mexico City. So most of the parents of the children that were in that school have been in jail or yeah. So it's a very difficult environment. So here the fifth grade children, they come up with an initiative that it was called the mural against violence. So they create with graffiti, they create a mural in their school against violence. But what it's even more amazing is that when we left the school, when we were in there, they keep creating different projects against violence, and they create their own rap against violence. So they compose it and they share it with the whole school, and the whole school during the recess, they used to sing together the rap against violence. And it was in the newspapers all around Mexico and everything, because they are really global citizens and they are agents of change. And this is for everyone, as we saw in Shadow, everyone can be a leader and everyone can be part of a team. So in this one is regarding sustainability also. It's from a children's home that is called Niño Jalapeño. They create their urban garden, and it's still working, and it was amazing to see how they organize, how they look for the resources to do it, and how they invited other adults to join their initiative. And the last one is from Guatemala. Here it was a rural school. The other ones were in the city, but in this case was in a rural school in Guatemala. So they saw that they didn't have enough medicines and enough supplies that they would need in a case of an emergency in the school. So they created these first aid kits for the school, and they learn using the power of play. They were all these global citizens using the power of play. They learned how to diagnose their reality, how to come up with proposals to help achieve the different the different challenges that they are facing. And they also ask others to join, and they implement them. So so the power of play, I think when we were talking about storytelling, that it's also a form of playing. It's a really good, really good tool to move the emotional part that we all have as human beings, and it helps us to join and to really be aware of ourselves, of our context and our world. So it was those are some of the examples. As Dina said, we're education for sharing, and our mission is to raise global citizens using the power of play. So yeah, so that's our methodology that we wanted to share with you. And also, if you need games, or if you have cool ideas for games that you want to share with us, we're totally open to hear from you.
Yes, thank you so much, Gabby. And we'd love to hear if you have any questions or comments or ideas, suggestions. We all have a role to play since we are very young and wherever we are. And we have seen this over and over again for 16 years. We have been around for 16 years, and we'd love to hear any questions from you. Yes, if there are questions, we'd love to hear them, or comments. That maybe we can see the gallery. If there are questions, this is a great time. If not, we will also share our email address, and we have a 2-minute video as well that we can share. But I just want to make sure there's space to listen to you. Any comments? Yes, I see Robert has. Please, Robert.
Yeah, thank you for providing all these inspiring stories. I was just wondering if y'all have ever done anything that involves like youth collaborating around the world. I know a lot of this stuff is local, like mainly in parts of Mexico, but like, have you thought of maybe like offering spaces for youth to collaborate, maybe youth from Mexico collaborating with like other ambassadors from China or Africa or these other places?
Wow, this is an incredible, beautiful question. Thank you so much, Robert. You know what? I don't think we have had like a collaboration between the local agents of change connected with other local global, and I just absolutely adore your idea. So if you have ideas around that, let's get together, please, because maybe we are onto something with your. I love your vision. Yes, and yes, please. We have done some exchanges, virtual exchanges, and we're starting to do more of that now. But as initiatives that kids come up with, I don't think we've done like global. So I love that. Sena is asking, what are some common traits you see among all these wonderful projects? Wow, what are some traits that make sense, that make this project so meaningful and impactful? You know what? I think the main common trait, and I would love to hear what Gabby thinks as well. In my perspective, the main common trait is that kids themselves, after playing these games, understand that they understand why do they care. And from that, from understanding why do they care, they choose something that they want to work on from their communities. And so they do it. teaming up with others, playing fair, respecting others, practicing gender equality and empathy. And so those are the common traits that I see. What do you think, Gabby?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And also, it's really important that we're really focused on the process, not only in the result. It's not the initiative or the project that it's amazing, but it's more the process, that everyone feels included, that everyone has the opportunity to be part of the team. The teachers, we work with the teachers, and us are really paying attention that everyone feels included, that everyone has the opportunity to share the ideas. It's not, for me, it wouldn't be as wonderful if they create, I don't know, a national song against violence if most of the group were left out, no? So they are really meaningful because we look to include everyone, and that everyone is the process, not the result. The result is important, but the process is even more important. So I think that's a common thing.
So I see we're in time. We will leave we will share with you a link to one of our videos that we wanted to share. It's a 2-minute video so that you see the kids in action and their voices. But we really want to thank you for participating, for being who you are, and for giving us hope for this world. And we want to team up with you for sure. Thank you so much, Radhika, Hein, Skylar, and all of the team. Thank you, Nick, as well. Thank all of you.
Thank you, Dina and Gabby. That was such a great activity, very fun. And yeah, we are so grateful to have you here. And thank you so much for sharing today. We'll be sure to send the video out and all of your contact information and all the information for E4S to the students. We have some quick reminders to go over before we end today's session. So just a reminder, you can join the Google Classroom at the link or through the code. And we also have a Slack channel, which is a digital communication platform for all of the eco ambassadors to chat with one another. If you are thinking of doing a story map project collaboratively, this would be a great place to ask students if they're interested in the same topic as you, so that you can work together to create a story together. And now we're going to talk a little bit about your story map projects and how you'll be making these for the end of the session. So if I could pass it to Hayan to kind of go through some of the logistics for this, that would be great.
Well, thank you, Skylar, and thank you again to all our speakers for making our program so rich with your insights and all the activities, and really getting us really thinking about all these big concepts and big terminology we always hear, but really bringing it, closer to us and to our community and ourselves with our awareness and with our peers, so we can talk about these things. So thank you so much for all your insights and everything you shared. So building on that, we're hoping that your story map can be a way in which all of the different ideas and topics that we're talking about and your own climate stories and your journeys to be reflected. So before we jump into the logistics of how you get access to it, the first thing is, so if you go to our Google Classroom, and maybe I can just very quickly share my screen so that I can show you the Google Classroom where you can find the information that we're talking about. Here you go. Can you see my screen for the Google Classroom? Yeah. Okay, great. So if you go to week 1, go into our Google Classroom, and then go on the top here, go to the classwork tab. Under week 1, if you go all the way down, there is a week 1 feedback. And here, before you get there, I know some of you have already turned it in, but actually before we even get there, if you scroll up a little bit, one of the activities for week 1 is an SDG bracket. A few of you have turned it in already. It's just a very quick exercise it's for you. You don't have to submit it. It's for you to get thinking about which one do you want to focus on, right? So after you have done this activity, after you look at the course syllabus and all the different topics we're going to be covering, you can go all the way down to the week 1 feedback, where we're asking you to think about your topic. So there are some general feedback from the week, but if you scroll down, we have a project specific section. So of course, my computer is taking some time to get there, but I'll just explain while this is loading, the screen's loading. So if you go to the bottom, there is a project section where we ask you to identify which SDG you're going to be focusing on. Also think about if you are going to be doing the project alone. Oh, what happened to our section on the project? Let me reload this. So let me stop share, but so I'll explain first, and we'll share the link with you to the survey. So there's a project section where you pick your SDG. You think about whether you're going to be working on the project alone or if you would like to work on a group project. And it could be someone from your school. It could be one of your fellow equal ambassadors. Maybe you can bring one of your family members to do it. So you can think a little bit based on the questions, how you want to go about doing the project. And then after that, you submit the email address. If you're working on your own, just share your email. If you're working in a group project, you can, among with your group, your team members, you can decide whose email is going to be kind of the point email for communication regarding the projects. And submitting your email address is important because that's the email address we're going to use to issue you the Story Maps license. So I think let's focus on doing that part, because on Thursday, we have our data session again, where we're going to kind of delve into, the tech part and the data, the geospatial tools part of our program. So if you can submit the survey, and I'll make sure that you have the updated link now to share it with you. If you can fill out that survey before Thursday. So by Thursday, we will have your email. Just make sure that, all of you that want to do different project types, we have captured that from our end in the survey. And let's go from there, because you will need the Esri license to access the story map. Because I know a few of you had emailed us this week asking, I think you tried to log in on your own without getting the issuing from our side. So it had all of these different questions that it asked you. So don't worry about that. Just focus on, if you can, sharing the email address that you want to use for these projects. And then it will be kind of an automatic process, because once we share the link with you, it will prompt you, you'll get a different link through your email. So just take a few more days to think about the SDG topic of your choice. Think about, a lot of things that the speakers shared today about, having this also be a reflection of opportunity to share your community story, your own stories too, right? So take a few days to think about that and pick a topic and share your email address with us. And then we can kind of on Thursday, refocus on, sharing the tools and the actual story maps. So let me see if I have missed any questions. So yeah, the link for Slack, maybe Skylar, if you can share that in the chat again. And then if you go into the Google Classroom week 1 at the very end, right now, right just after this call, I'll make sure that you have the updated survey link that has the project component. So I know we went over a little bit in time, but thank you. I think it was worth going over time so that we can hear from you as well. Thank you again to all our speakers. And if there are no other questions, we'll see you on Thursday again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in a few days.